Christmas, everybody! I hope you're having a fantastic day. We're certainly grateful to be back in our little cozy cottage here on campus and very happy to see our kids and be able to spend a little time. Even the dog has curled up in his regular chair, more than happy to be nice and warm again.
And we move a dial and the house gets warmer. It's remarkable how it works here in North America. So it's nice to be back. Hey, you probably noticed we started this video out with the theme song for this whole Rob and Leslie's French Advent, which of course has been "For unto us a son is given, a child is born." Which comes from Handel's Messiah, one of the, in my opinion, greatest pieces of music ever put together. The lyrics are absolutely beautiful. It's Christmas, and so I'm not sure if you watch our videos, you probably notice that most of our introductory and exit songs are from Handel's Messiah. A lot of it's instrumental, but if you ever have the chance, you should watch the whole thing. It's absolutely incredible.
Powerful, yeah.
Really excited about today's video. We're going to do a special Christmas video. And so we're going to tell a little bit more of our story, part 2. I'm trying to get her to tell her story, but I kind of like talking more than Leslie does. So hopefully we're going to get Leslie to tell her first part of her story. But we're going to take it from kind of part 2, where we get together and we start our life together. So we hope you sit back and enjoy it. Clearly, the Christ, the baby in a manger, is going to come into this video. There's no way of telling the story without it. And it's Christmas, so I feel good about that. And hopefully you feel good about it. Hopefully you'll listen to it and enjoy it as well. Hey everybody, it's Story Sunday and also Christmas Day, day 25. So really excited to tell you guys part 2 of our story. One of my favorite things about the Chateau and especially the YouTube channel has been just the variety of folks that have been watching and commenting and talking to us. I think it's so important for us as human beings to listen to each other and not just to become insulated, and only talk to people from our country and from our perspective and our worldview and belief system. And so I love it. Sometimes I read comments like, hey, I'm not super religious, but I listen to you guys. And that is so encouraging to me. Thank you for listening. And I appreciate that. Sometimes I also hear from some Christians who are like, hey, don't be ashamed of Christianity, and trigger warnings. Don't misunderstand. Don't confuse graciousness and respect for ambiguity or embarrassment. I know exactly what I believe. I'm just trying to follow the teachings of Jesus when he says, love your neighbors and do unto others as you'd want to do. So trying to open up a dialogue and talk, and so hopefully you can understand that. With that said, I can't wait to tell you about today's story. This story might even be more helpful for those who have not a ton of background in Christianity, because you'll understand it a little bit more, or at the very least you'll understand Christians. There's a lot of 2.5 billion Christians on the planet right now, and so it's, sociologically it's not a bad move to try to understand what drives them. And as I tell this story, I think that will come through too. So thanks so much for listening. Are you ready for part 2? Here goes. So I was growing up on this Bible college campus in the middle of Saskatchewan, Caronport, Saskatchewan. And my first connection with Christmas or Christianity was probably my parents bringing me out to church. And I actually have a vivid memory for being about 4 or 5 years old. And it was a sermon from the Bible. The preacher was talking about heaven and what happens after you die and hell. And the one thing you got to say for religions in general, and Christianity in particular, definitely have answers to the life's deeper questions. You may not always like them, you may not always agree with them, but they definitely have answers. And so in the Bible, it basically talks about, God judging it after you die and you go to one place or the other. And so as a 5-year-old, I was like, I don't want to go to that place. I'd like to go to heaven. How do I do that? And so I asked my parents, and of course they had again, doctorates and master's degrees in religion. So they had read the Bible, and they're like, well, you confess your sins and you believe in God and you follow him, and you repent, you have a new start. And so I'm like, great, sign me up, I'll pray. And that was sort of my Christianity for the first 10, 15 years of life. As I got to high school, I started reading the Bible for myself. And to be honest, the words resonated in my heart, particularly the words of Jesus, love your enemies. You've heard it said, do good to your friends and hate your enemies. I tell you, love your enemies. Do good to those who persecute you. Genius. Forgive others when they do stuff to you. Do unto others as you would have done unto yourself. Love your neighbors. Feed the poor. Visit the sick. Help the starving. Be kind to the immigrants. Just so much stuff. And as I read the passages in the scriptures, and all of them, by the way, not just the good, nice, easy ones, they resonated. And it started to kind of change who I was, and in a good way, I think. Also, around high school, if you study developmental theory, you know that you start to, your mind starts to change, and you start to think about deeper thoughts, and you start to realize things. And what had been kind of a simple faith for me as a kid became more complicated. Not only did I love the ideas of the New Testament, but I started to look at the person of Jesus, the baby in the manger. And I mean, I watched like the Jesus movie, and I saw stories about his life and what he did for us, and the idea of the God of the universe coming down to this world to help us, to put us back on track, to give us a second chance. I mean, it was beautiful. And the sacrifice, all the stuff that happened with the cross and humans turning on him. You've got, in the Bible, you have the story of a God who creates these humans and loves them and wants the best for them and tries to give them advice and help them along, and yet we keep turning on him and kind of rejecting him. And so finally he sends his son to us. It's a beautiful story, and it was moving to me. And as I hit that kind of level of cognitive development where I could feel things and realize these things, the story of Jesus moved me emotionally very deeply and became very central to who I am. Now, around that time in high school, there was a lady, June Stinson, who was directing a camp, a Bible camp in Saskatchewan. And so I was walking home from school with a friend, and all of a sudden June came up to us, 14, 15-year-old kids, and she's like, hey, I could really use a guy like, we could use some guys like you guys helping us out at camp this summer. And I was like, you could use me? Like, I could be part of helping and making the world better? And that was exciting. I said, absolutely. So we signed up and went out to a Kenosee Lake Bible camp for 2 weeks, and it was so much fun. We had a blast. You're playing football and soccer, and you're running around playing games and hanging out with kids. We were counselors, like junior counselors, and swimming in the lake and all the wonderful things that you do at camp. Just an amazing time. And what was incredible to me, though, was at the end of the week, they would sometimes do a campfire where kids would talk about what they had learned, and they would share and stuff. And so I'm just thinking we're having a great week and everything's fine. And we're doing some, studies and stuff, and I'm talking once in a while. Learn how to play guitar. It was fun. But then I started to listening to what the kids would say at the end of the week, and they'd be like, man, my life is really hard, and this week has been so great for me, and I've learned so much, and I want to be a better person, and all of this kind of thing. And it was life-changing, and I'm like, this is incredible. And so I loved going out to camp. In fact, Leslie and I both went out to camp, that same camp, Kenosee Lake Bible Camp, for 7 years. First as counselors and then as assistant directors. So a couple of years later, I'm in high school. Now I'm in grade 11 going into grade 12. I'm 16 years old. I'm pretty excited about myself, you know how it is when you're young. And I'm thinking I'm good looking and all that. And anyways, so I'm off to camp, and all of a sudden one day I see these two new girls that have come to the camp, and stunningly beautiful. And so I'm pretty scared to talk to them. But kind of notice them from afar and all of that. And the weeks go on. And one week, as we start to counsel, there's this one girl in particular, and she is strikingly beautiful, and she has an intelligent look about her, and she knows what she thinks, and she's not, she has a steely resolve, and so I start to think, man, this girl's pretty cool. And one day, one of my fellow counselors, he comes up to me and he's like, hey, why don't we go on a date? Why don't we see if the director will let us go on a date for a couple hours? Which is unusual, because you only get 1 hour off a day usually, working out there, volunteering out there. And so sure enough, we talked to the director, and the director gave us permission to have 2 hours off. And so he said, why don't we just go find two girls that we think are great, and maybe ask them out at dinner. So sure enough, the two of us got up and walked over in front of the whole camp, kind of everybody's eating their meal, maybe a couple hundred people, kids mostly. And we asked the first girl that he sort of likes, and she's like, yeah, it sounds like fun, let's do it. And so then the two of us walk over to Leslie, and she's sitting there with her cabin. And you have to know about Leslie, she seems pretty confident, and she is pretty confident in design and in life and stuff, but she is naturally a pretty quiet person. And so she doesn't like a ton of attention. She doesn't enjoy that. That's not her. She doesn't get off on that or anything. So, all of a sudden these two guys are standing up next to her, and we're kind of saying, I'm like, hi, we're thinking about going on a double date. Would you like to come with us on a double date? We'd have lots of fun, and we're gonna do some stuff. And so she just sits there looking at me, no answer. And I'm like, oh, it's gonna be great. We're gonna, blah, 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 blah. And she made us stand there for maybe like 30 seconds, a minute, like till it was awkward. And then finally she said yes. Now it turns out she had come from a small town. There's not a lot of Christians, and sometimes in Canada, well, I don't want to be judgy, but sometimes in Canada, Christians aren't the most popular. And so she was kind of a little bit alone in high school, to be honest. And here she is, this incredibly cute girl who's got all this character and all these things that I don't even recognize yet. And yet she was surprised that we were asking her out because she hadn't experienced a lot of that. And back then I was pretty outgoing and confident, and so I got a lot of attention at camp. And she's like, "Why is this guy talking to me?" It's kind of like the quintessential high school movie where the female star has not seen her own beauty yet, at least in my opinion. And so so finally she says yes. We go off. We have a great time. Our plan A is to go. Our first date, we're going to go to the two of us. Again, remember, we think we're cool, and so we can get away with doing funny things. And so we're like, we're going to go to the garbage dump, and we're going to watch bears. Because this is Canada. Sometimes the bears would come to the garbage dump. Kind of fun to see bears. And so we got some food, some pizza. We were going to try to barbecue, which went really badly. Little camp stove. And we were going to go watch the bears. Well, we get there, and of course, the dump is locked, so we can't see the bears. So our second strategy is to try to find an oil pump, of which there are some in the area. And we got to the oil pump and just took a look at it. And then we actually tried to play a game, Capture the Flag, with 4 people, which is ridiculous if you know wide games. But it was fun. At the end of the date, we're just walking around together. And again, I'm pretty shy. She's pretty shy in a lot of ways. And so we're on the teeter-totter. And then the other couple, we find out later, is trying to get us together. And so they're kind of like, "Hey, why don't we play Farmer Brown? Farmer Brown, won't you please let me down?" Which is a game that you're on the teeter-totter, and they have to ask you a question, then you answer it, and then they let you down, kind of thing. And so sure enough, Leslie and I are on one side and they're on the other side. Now, of course, I'm not going to touch Leslie. Like, I'm a gentleman here, so I'm trying to hold on to the back of the teeter-totter with us not physically touching at all, because I don't, and so I almost fall off, which is awkward enough, but I'm trying to be a gentleman. So we get up there, and one of the questions was, they're like, "So, and who was the last person you kissed?" And I had a girlfriend about a year before that, so I'm like, "Well, it's been about a year, I kissed a girl." And then they asked Leslie that. She's like, "Last weekend." And I was like, what I didn't know is she was playing sneaky. The last boy she kissed was her dad, kissing her goodbye to go to camp. She'd never actually dated someone. But I was thinking, oh, maybe this is not going to work out, because she's knows somebody else, or she's in love with somebody else. And so we ended the date. It was great. As the summer went on, I started to become more attracted to her from afar. Like, I watched her working with her kids. The truth is, back then I had no idea of the character woman she was. I had no idea how good with money she would be, or how incredible her sense of style was, or her determination and stick-to-itiveness, and her desire to make the world a better place. I didn't recognize any of that stuff. I just knew that she was super cute. Kind of shallow, but there it is. It has to start somewhere, right? And so towards the end of the summer, I remember thinking, man, I really like this girl, and I'm never going to see her again, because we're going off to different towns. Saskatchewan, there's no internet back then. How are we going to ever talk to each other? It's like $1 a minute to talk on the phone back then. And so I was really depressed, and I was talking to one of my friends, and then he goes, "Didn't you hear? Leslie's coming to Cairnport next year," which is my school. And I was so excited, I started jumping, and he's like, stop, her mom's right there. So it's kind of funny. So sure enough, Leslie came out to Cairnport. We started dating a couple months later in October, I think. We were 16. Leslie might have been 17, I think. And we started falling in love. Now, it became clear to me, I knew I wanted to marry her when we were 18. I was sure of it. I went out tree planting. I was up in northern British Columbia, and it was terrible. We're working 12-hour days. It was really tough, every day, by the way, 31 days in a row. We got paid really well, but it was a super hard job. And so I'm out there, and I'm just like, man, I do not want to live without this girl. And I'm thinking, I want to marry her. And so I'm like, I'm going to go out and tree plant and get enough money to buy a ring. So I came home, and I went to my parents, and I'm 18, and I'm kind of like, Mom, Dad, I think I'd really like to marry Leslie. And my mom looks at me, and my mom's, this makes her sound bad, but she was really good. She's like, Rob, she's like, I think you need a cold shower. And I'm just like, and so I let it alone. But I came back a couple weeks later, and I think maybe I went to my dad next time. I said, Dad, I really like Leslie. I think she's the one. I'd like to marry her. What do you think? And I'm 18, right? And he's like, yeah. And by that point, he was kind of like, we really like Leslie. She's a character girl. She'd be a great person to marry. can you wait till you finish college? That's 2 more years. And I'm like, I don't know if I can wait. And then I pulled the Bible card. There's a verse in the Bible that's like, it's better to marry than to burn with passion. So I'm like, Paul said it's better to marry than to burn. And, and so I made a deal with my parents. And the deal was, I said, how about this? If I finish college in 3 years, will you let me marry Leslie after 2? So that means at the end of next summer, we could get married. And then I'll just take a lot of classes. And they said, that sounds good. They wanted to encourage the ambition. And so sure enough, finished college in 3 years. Leslie did her first 2 years and then actually put us through the last year. And we became married students at the age of 19. So that was wonderful. After that, we both knew we wanted to work with young people. At that point, I thought I was going to be a college teacher, teaching maybe the Bible. That's what my parents did. And I needed a little bit of experience. I needed a master's degree. And so we said, let's go off to school. And one of the best schools around we thought was Trinity Evangelical Divinity School in Chicago, Deerfield, Illinois. And so we said, well, why don't we try to go there? Problem is, it is expensive in the United States. Back then, I think it was like 10,000 American, and we had Canadian dollars. So we started saving up so hard. Like we lived on $100 a month for food. A lot of times we'd run out of milk or meat. We just wouldn't have any more for the month. I don't know if we had toothpaste sometimes. We just were really, really careful with money. I found out then that Leslie's really good at being careful with money. And started saving up. And again, we worked at camp. And when you're at camp, you don't spend any money. So any money the camp pays you just goes directly into the bank. That was great. And sure enough, we managed to save up $10,000 over the year to go for tuition. But we didn't have enough for like living expenses, like a rental or anything like that. So we're like, what are we gonna do? Again, by this point, remember, we're 21, so we're still pretty young. We've been married a year, and we're trying to go to the United States. And so we hear about this thing called a live-in agreement, where you can kind of basically be live-in servants for some folks. And they give you free rent, and you do whatever they ask you to do, clean the house or take care of the kids or whatever. And it's just a great option for people with no money like us, poor kids. And they tell me it's legal too. I trusted them. The school said it was legal. And so we said, well, let's apply. And we started trying to find somebody that would do this. And so we started calling. And there's not a lot of them available. And so finally we found one lady in Highland Park, and she's kind of like, and she was kind of like, yeah. She goes, I'd be interested in talking to you guys. When can you come by for an interview? And I'm like, well, we're in Saskatchewan, so how about in 2 days? And she says, yes. So we jump in the car, we drive 2 days to Chicago, and sure enough, the lady likes us, and she says, sure, you guys can do it. And we live in a small room in the house. Our first place was tough. The lady was quite a bit older and thought that people were stealing from her, and probably some of her servants were, but it wasn't us. But sometimes she would accuse everyone of it, and that was tough because we'd never really been in that situation before. And so we worked there for a few months, and then found another place and did the same thing. And we moved in with just a beautiful, wonderful couple that was so good to us, the Hollanders. So things were going pretty good. We were making it by, and all of our expenses were basically covered, living in this beautiful home, and until our car started to die. We had this 1981 Mazda GLC, and it was kind of a piece of garbage. Like, we loved it, but it had like these soup cans and tinfoil holding the muffler together, that kind of thing. And so, it would just start dying occasionally, and we'd be driving like on the freeways, the interstates, and all of a sudden this car would just die. And then we figured out that if we picked up the fuel filter, I don't know anything about cars, but when we picked up the fuel filter and put it back, it would drive for another 20 minutes. So we just did that, and we did that for a couple months, and eventually we're kind of like, okay, we need to get a better car. This is dangerous on the freeways, to have a car just conk out while you're in the middle lane and guys are zipping by. So sure enough, we found a pretty cheap Ford Mustang, and I loved it. It was so cool. I was really excited. And again, at this point, remember that we're immigrants. We don't know how to do this. We're 21 years old in another country, maybe even 21. Yeah, it's 20 actually. And we're in another country. We're on our own. Our parents aren't really supporting us financially or anything like that. They want us to learn. And my dad actually had said before we left on the trip, he said, you're going to learn a lot of things doing a master's degree. But the biggest thing you're going to learn is faith, you know. And he was so right. And so sure enough, we buy this car. I go down to the DMV and I ask, okay, so what do I need to do? I've never, bought a car in America. What do I need to do to license this thing and insure it? And they're kind of like, okay, you just need this little sticker, this drive-off permit. It's $5. And I'm thinking, well, that's really cheap, because in Canada, in Saskatchewan, when you buy your plates, that's also your insurance. So it's a little bit more. And I just assumed the whole world was that way. That's the thing about being an immigrant. You don't know what you don't know. And so they said, that's all you need. I said, that's all I need. And they said, okay. So I put it on. I said, okay, here we go. We're going to head for home. And so we jumped in the car. We finished exams. It was Christmas time. We were going home. And I think we were too poor to rent a hotel or anything. So I think we left at like 9 p.m. after the last exam. We were going to drive through the night and the next day, 17-hour drive. But that's just how you have to do it when you're young. And so we got in the car. We started driving. Leslie took the Mustang, the better car, and I was driving the piece of junk GLC behind her. And so we started driving. Well, we get to Wisconsin. The snow starts coming down. It's kind of slushy. There's slush on the roads. We're on the interstate. Now we're Canadians. We've driven on snow a long time. But this was different because if you know anything about Mustangs, they're rear-wheel drive with big wheels, which means they're not good on slush. And so sure enough, we're driving pretty conservatively. All of a sudden, this guy whips by us and kind of cuts Leslie off really tight. She touches the brakes. Car goes into a spin. And I'm watching behind. I'm like, ah. And so I'm like, I hit the brakes and she hits the brakes and we're getting closer. And then we both end up in the ditch. And I'm like, oh, thank goodness. That could have been really bad. And so I'm thinking it's going to take us an hour to get out of here. And then we're going to be even later. But all of a sudden, while I'm thinking that, out of the corner of my eye, another car comes going, boom, smashes directly into Leslie. And I mean, the car is totaled. And I'm just sitting there, again, 20 years old, and I'm thinking, did I just lose the love of my life? And so because I'm young and goofy, I'm wearing sandals. I kick off my sandals and I'm running in the snow and I'm like, Leslie. And I get to the car and I'm opening the door and she's crying, but she's okay. And I'm like, oh, thank goodness. And so then I run over to the other car and they're okay too. And I'm like, oh, thank goodness. And I'm like, this is bad. I'm like, man, this car is totaled. And I'm like, I don't know how this is going to work with insurance because that other guy just kept driving, the guy that cut us off. And so that's not okay. And so sure enough, the police come and, tow trucks start coming and all that stuff. And the police come and talk to me and they said, okay, all right. So we'd like to see your license and registration. I said, sure, here it is, officer. Give it to him. And he's like, and your proof of insurance? And I said, it's right here, it's the drive-off permit. And they're like, that's not insurance. And I said, they said it's all I need. They go, I said, that's insurance. And he's like, it's not insurance. And then he said, can you get in the back of the car, please? And I'm kind of like, ah. So he puts me in the back of the car and the lights are flashing in our face. And I'm like, what is going to happen to us? And about that time, an ambulance pulls up. And now I'm getting really scared because I've heard crazy stories about people getting sued in the United States. And I'm thinking, we're in trouble. We're in big trouble. So sure enough, I talked to the office for a while. They let us go, and they said, this will go to court, and you'll hear from us. And our car is totaled, and so we all have to get into the the old piece of junk car, and we limp home. A tow truck comes and takes the Mazda away, and we get home. We're kind of like, I don't know what we should do here. And all of a sudden, we start getting emails and letters. I guess it was before email, so it must have been letters or phone calls. And we get a call from the auto wrecker, and they say, yeah, your car is wrecked. In fact, you owe us money for towing it. And then we get another letter from the Wisconsin police saying you were driving without insurance. There's going to be a fine. Who knows? We'll see what happens to you. And then we get another one. We get a letter from a lawyer saying we believe you to be at fault in this accident, and we'd like to sue you for $1 million. And I'm kind of like, I have like a bicycle. I have like a Walkman. I think we don't have $1 million. What are we going to do? And so Leslie and I start talking. We're like, should we even go back to the United States? Maybe we should just stay in Canada. This is not seeming great. And because, again, our car is wrecked. And we were going to sell that car to have enough money to pay for everything. And so now we basically don't have a car. and we don't have money, and we might be going to jail, and we might be getting sued. And so we're like, how are we going to do this? And so we think about it and we pray about it, and eventually, this is where being married to a character person helps. Leslie's like, I think we should do it. We started on this journey. Let's finish it. Let's go back. Let's face the music. We'll take our punishment and we'll see what happens. And so sure enough, this is, by the way, the value of being connected to people. Sometimes I talk about church and how it's important to have people in your life that can support you and help you. And man, this is a prime example. So, all of a sudden we were like, we don't know how we're gonna get back. We had some friends that said, hey, we've always wanted to go to Chicago. If you pay for gas, we'll drive you. And we're like, oh, that's great. We get in the car, we go back. Again, remember, we don't have enough money for living expenses. We're living with very nice people, the Hollanders. So we come in, we walk in the front door, and we're actually switching from the two places. So this is the first time we've ever lived with the Hollanders. This is the first time we're walking in. And so we walk in, and Bill's kind of like, he's like, Rob, Leslie, how was your trip? And we're kind of like, oh, it's so bad. We got in an accident, And we're totally whining, and we're like, oh, we don't know what to do. And they're like, oh, no. And so they're like, oh, we'll help you out. Don't worry about it. We'll help you out. He goes, we have a third car. You can drive our third car. And we're just like, that's incredible. Thank you so much. I mean, that's amazing. And so we're like, okay, that's great. And then sure enough, it was incredible how people came to help us out. Like we had friends come up to us and say, hey, we're all in school, we're all poor, but I just wanted to say that my grandma just died, and I just got a little bit of inheritance, and we'd like to give you $600 to help. And we said, oh man, that's great, thank you so much. And another friend said, hey, I got this old car, you can have this old car if you want. And then this is even better. We've been volunteering, working in a church with junior high kids because we love it so much. And I went to my friend Steve, and I'm like, Steve, we love it here, we love helping out, but I think I better find some kind of job. Remember, we're immigrants, so we can't work and we can't take loans. But we can do internships. There's some kind of provision for that. So we could have like a really small paying church job. And so I said, I'm probably gonna have to find, something that gives us a little bit of money so we can survive. And he's like, just wait a minute. And so he goes, let me talk to some guys. And so I'd been going really good at the church. And sure enough, he talked to the board, and then he talked to the senior pastor, and he came back to me. He's like, here's what we'd like to do. The board says there's no more money in the budget this year, but the senior pastor and I have both agreed to take a pay cut, and we're going to give that money to you guys and hire you guys. Isn't that amazing? Such a beautiful thing. And so we're like, oh, that's great. So we start working, but we're still worried about getting sued, right? And so sure enough, our friends that we were living with in Chicago had some of their friends over for dinner when we arrived. And so we're telling this story, and all of a sudden the other guy at the table is kind of going, He's like, do you have that letter with you? And I said, yeah. And he says, can I take a look at it? And so I give the letter to him. He's like, yeah. He's like, I'm an attorney. He's like, they're just trying to extort money from you. This is not your fault. He's like, I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to take on your case pro bono, for free. We're going to take on your case for free. He's like, every time you get a letter, bring it to me and I'll take care of it. And we're just like, oh. So it was amazing how God rescued us from this situation. It turns out we got a letter from Wisconsin. They said, we found you guilty. Leslie's not allowed to drive in the state of Wisconsin for 2 years, and Rob's not allowed to register a car for 2 years. So Leslie registered the car and I drove. We had the car we could use from our friends, the Hollanders. We had folks that helped us with the tuition money. And then we kept bringing the letters over to the lawyer, and we noticed they kept going down in cost. He said, don't read them, but I did. And they kept going down. Ultimately, it was, I think, originally it was $1 million for mental trauma and $2 for a bottle of aspirin or something they were looking for. So there was no actual injuries, just in case anyone's wondering. But it was incredible. It was incredible to see how God brought us through that. And kind of what we've discovered in life is that, you take a step of faith, and then, and it's hard and it's scary, and then, God takes care of you, people help you, and you get more courage to take the next step. And so that was kind of the first time we'd had a really difficult step. So much more to tell of our story, and I can't wait to get to part 3. So here we are, our last day, and we decided to come to our favorite place in America.
It was our historic family place.
Yeah, we go, a lot of Sundays we'll come with the kids,
Yeah.
and we go to the Olive Garden.
Mm-hmm.
Here it is. We love the place dearly. How did we start going to the Olive Garden, Bess?
So when we were 20, we were in Chicago. Rob was doing his master's. We were students, and we would, every penny that we had went into tuition, and so we didn't have any money. And I'm sure Rob will tell the story of what else we did there in order to make ends meet later. But we had friends that would go out to eat, and we had no money to do that. So we would go and hang out with them at the restaurant for fun and have water and, I don't know, something. I don't even know what we had. And it was our beginning of marking certain significant things in our life. So when Rob graduated with his master's, we went to Olive Garden. Anyway, so it's continued to be tradition for us to mark different events in our family's life.
And we have our orders down to a science. Leslie likes the salad, which, by the way, refillable. Olive Garden is so good if you've never been. Zuppa Toscana, one of my favorite foods on the planet.
Yeah.
Again, they'll just keep it coming. So when we had kids, we could order for $20, 2 kids meals, 1 adult meal, more than enough food. So it was great. And when we were kind of low-paid pastors, we love the place. It costs a little bit more now, but we still find ways.
It's true.
So we specifically chose this. I had the fettuccine alfredo today. Leslie has the 5 cheese ziti. A lot of times, if it's just the two of us, we'll split a tour of Italy. It works up to about $10 each. We kind of actually specifically chose to come here for our last one because at least I realized that watching these videos kind of becomes a personal thing, like a relational thing. At least when I watch videos, you start to kind of feel like you know the person and you kind of start to become friends. And so we wanted you guys to kind of see who we are, and this is a huge part of who we are. So it's not France, but we still love it. And so thanks for coming.
Big thanks to all of you who have watched every day, watched all of our crazy commercials that are probably in there, and we're grateful for all of the chances that you had to come along on our journey on this crazy little Advent. And all of those of you who have actually watched all the way through. That's super special to us, and we're grateful for that. We're also super thankful for all of you Patreon followers and supporters. There's a lot of jobs that we couldn't do just if we didn't have you on board, and so we're super grateful for that. And of course, I'm super grateful for our neighbor and all of our neighbors who have been so kind and generous to us this past year as we've sort of fit into a new community. And to those of them that are watching our house while we're gone, and we're super happy that you're able to do that for us as well.
We had a lot of fun shooting these videos, and we'll probably try to do it again next year. We're gonna be back. We're back in the Chateau very soon, a few weeks really.
Yeah.
But before that, we're gonna do a video before the end of the year here, updating you guys on the roof because we've had lots of good news and lots of good developments. So we're excited, and obviously that's a huge step forward. Thanks to all of you, and a big Merry Christmas to each of you.